Matthew Levine. I am the Director of Grants and Advocacy and Partnerships at the American Macular Degeneration Foundation. And since you're all here, it's because you've got a communication through the American Macular Degeneration Foundation. So you must know something about us already, but just to remind you, we are an organization that is completely in the service of patients. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for everybody affected by macular degeneration, patients, family members, people in the network. And I think you can already get a sense from what Soufiane has just said, why we're here together today. We believe very powerfully in providing all the tools that people with macular degeneration need to help manage their own conditions. We think that in addition to medical consultations and working very closely with your eye care specialists in your life with macular degeneration, there's so many things now that people can do for themselves to improve their quality of life and to hopefully slow their progression of their disease and reduce their risk for developing it. So that's why we're partnered here today with Soufiane. And we also are really happy to have Dr. Hitchmuth with us. Dr. Hitchmuth also appears in a video that we helped to create that you can find on our website. So we have history with both of these excellent presenters. We think that you're going to really get a lot out of what's presented to you today, because it's not just going to be information. It's going to be what you can do with the information to help improve your life. I also want to mention that it's just as important for people in your family who may be younger than you as it is for you. Because the earlier you understand what, if you have the disease, that you can intervene. And if you can manage to slow the progression of this disease, it is possible that you can outlive the worst manifestations of the disease. That's true for all chronic diseases. So that's what we're hoping you do. We're hoping you educate your family about what you learn here today as also. And since a lot of what you're going to hear about is nutrition-based today, we also like to invite you to our website where you can get some free recipes that are all based on scientific evidence that we have put together into recipes. We have a cookbook, but we also offer you a lot of free recipes on our website. And this is just the beginning, as Soufiane said. We're going to have this ongoing dialogue in which we hope to provide you with the tools that you'll enjoy using and be able to use to positively impact your own lives. I'll turn it back over to Soufiane now.
Perfect, and thank you. Thanks a lot, Matthew, for all what you have just shared. And I want to say a few words about Dr. Hitchmuth, because she's a good friend of mine, and I'm so glad that you managed to free yourself and join us for this webinar. So what you need to know is that Dr. Hitchmuth is just very, very renowned optometrist. And for those of you who don't know her, you should start knowing her. She has been in practice for 29 years and has taught medical and optometry residents at Dartmouth and NACO. She has a 22 years tenure serving at the VAs, and also she has served as chief and hospital executive during that time. She has currently a private practice in rural New Hampshire, so if you're there, feel free to reach out to her. And this practice, by the way, is an AMDF Center of Excellence, where she continues to pursue innovation and preventative care. And she's currently the president of the Ocular Wellness and Nutrition Society, and she will say a few words about that afterwards. And she has been also featured in the AMDF documentary that Matthew just talked about, Losing Sight, Finding Hope, that I also urge you to go and watch. And also she has served as a business consultant for countless corporations, and she's a key influencer in public policy and legislation regarding access to healthcare. And finally, last but not least, she has been featured in 2 documentary films and has been dubbed America's Eye Doctor by her colleagues. Just that. So I think that from now on, I will just leave this webinar and just let you, maybe Dorothy, like, so much respect for you, Dorothy, and please, the floor is yours. You're unmuted now. No, you can't talk.
Well, the love is mutual, and thank you for that kind introduction. And if it wasn't for the research that you do, we wouldn't have the tools as doctors to help our patients. So pat yourself on the back.
Thanks a lot. Maybe do you want to say a few words about OWNS for people here who don't know what
Sure.
OWNS is?
So yes, thank you for bringing that up. So yes, I'm the president of the Ocular Wellness and Nutrition Society. So we're a group of scientists and doctors that have really dedicated our practice to prevention. And you're going to hear a lot about that during the webinar today. But if you're specifically looking for a doctor who can individualize your treatment and give you local support, I would encourage you to go to our website, to our Find a Doctor locator. And you can find a doc that has the same knowledge as me and the same passion as me for preventing vision loss. And we'll put that web link in the chat momentarily. But yes, I just wanted to mention briefly that there are other resources locally with local docs after this, despite all the wonderful resources on the AMDF website, which I'd encourage you to go to first.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And maybe now, I will share my screen. And does everyone here see my screen? Okay, perfect. So I will just put this here. Yeah. So as I said at the beginning, the objective of this webinar here is to help you break that cycle of helplessness due to AMD. As I also come from a family where AMD is very prevalent. Many members of my family are losing their sight from this disease. That's why, by the way, I decided to do my PhD in the first place, to be able to do something about it. And but I've also conducted interviews with more than 50 people who are affected with macular degeneration. And every single time there were two insights that I would learn from these interviews. The first one is that how people who are affected with AMD feel powerless regarding their disease progression. There's a huge need here in terms of helplessness regarding what to do, what to actively do, how can we take action in managing our disease progression. And the second one is this feeling of loneliness regarding the diagnosis of AMD. Here, for you guys who are here today, you are fortunate enough to be very well informed by AMDF and supported by AMDF, but know that there are many people out there who have no support at all. There are 20 million Americans who have AMD, by the way. 1 in 10 Americans aged 50 years or plus have AMD. And there are 200 million in the world suffering from AMD as well. And so, logically, once I realized that during my research work, I would only spend my whole time trying to answer one single question, which is this one. How can we today empower AMD patients to take an active role in managing their disease progression? And this way, you don't just wait for your next appointment at your eye doctor to be able to go receive your injection. For example, if you have the advanced stage, like wet AMD or geographic atrophy, or if you are at the early stage, just hope that your vision will not deteriorate by the next time you see your eye doctor again. And so how to act on it? How can you have an active role in managing your disease progression? Well, there are two kinds of factors or risk factors that impact the onset of AMD. You have what we call non-modifiable risk factors like age, genetics, and ethnicity. Age is the leading risk factor for macular degeneration. That's why the name of the disease is age-related macular degeneration. We will also talk later during this webinar about the genetics role and the genetics component of macular degeneration. And of course, there is also ethnicity that impacts the risk of having AMD over time. But then you have also modifiable risk factors, which are the risk factors that we are going to focus on during this webinar, and one in particular called lifestyle, as lifestyle is the number one modifiable risk factor to be able to impact your disease progression. And I will just share with you now a few insights from the scientific literature that I want you to be aware of, and that I want you to remember and to share with your loved ones, with your families. As we said, there is a genetic component to AMD. So please, whatever you learn during this webinar, that is, by the way, recorded and will be made available to you at the end of the session. But please take notes and try to remember this, what I'm going to share with you right now, because this will help you a lot to have the right reflexes in your everyday life to be able to act on your AMD. So just know that men who drink heavily, and by heavily here, I mean more than 4 alcoholic beverages per day, are 9 times more likely to develop geographic atrophy, which is the advanced form of dry AMD. And of course, you will have access, as I said, to this webinar and all these statements that I'm saying here and sharing with you. You can have access to the scientific article that is cited here at the bottom of every slide. Light alcohol consumption, on the other hand, does not appear to significantly impact your risk of having AMD. Smokers, well, smoking, I think that there are no more mysteries regarding smoking, right? But just know that a few statistics regarding the association between smoking and AMD. Smokers exhibit a 3-fold increased risk for advanced AMD, and heavy smokers exhibit a risk that reached 5-fold compared to non-smokers. But the good news here is that if you quit smoking, well, after a while, your risk of developing AMD will become the same as someone who has never smoked in their entire life. And that's what I mean by lifestyle is a very powerful modifiable risk factor that you can't act on. Imagine that you can be smoking your whole life, but then once you stop smoking and you maintain your quitting, then at some point you will have a risk that is the same as someone who has never smoked in their entire life. And also sleeping is very, very important. What we have shown also is that sleeping less than 6 hours per night increases the risk of neovascular AMD by over 3-fold. And this is compared to people who sleep 7 hours or more, right? So try always to sleep at least 7 hours. It will help you a lot with your disease progression. And longer sleep duration causally reduce the risk of AMD. That's what I was talking about right now. And by causally here, I want to spend like 1 minute talking about this causal association, because this word causally is very important. There is, let's take smoking, for example, as an example, okay? At the beginning, when we didn't know yet that smoking killed, people and researchers were showing that smoking was associated to bad health incomes. Like, for example, that smoking was associated to cancer, smoking was associated to all kinds of other comorbidities that you might have. And at some point, they launched clinical trials, which is the best way to show a relationship between, for example, smoking in our case and the risk of death. And after clinical trials, they have shown that smoking was causally associated to death. In other words, this means that smoking causes death. Here, longer sleep durations causes a reduced risk of AMD. So that's the highest level of association that you can reach. And also sun exposure. You can see here that people with high sun exposure are 38% more likely to develop AMD. I don't know why we have these few crosses here. Let me maybe stop sharing my screen and share it again. Maybe it will vanish. Yes, now it's better. Okay, but now that we have said all that, we all know that genetics has AMD has these genetic components. But then I love this sentence here and this saying that I'm sharing with you right now, that heredity deals the cards and environment plays the hand. So let's try to work on our environment to be able to win despite the cards that have been dealt to us. And what I mean by heredity deals the card is that it means that when you have a genetic risk, what does that mean to have a genetic risk? It means that in your genome, right, you have some genetic variants, or that which we can call also in some situations mutations of your genes. Like your gene mutates, let's say. And sometimes you have a few mutations that can increase your risk of developing advanced AMD over time, right? And so here, these ARMS2 and CFH are genes that are associated with an increased risk of advanced AMD. And here in this specific scientific statement here, it shows that it multiplies your risk of having advanced AMD by 62 times, meaning that the people who have these genes have a risk of having advanced AMD that is 62 times higher than people who are not carrying these genes, right? And just I want also to say here that I'm really trying to oversimplify all these concepts to make them easily understandable. But please feel free after this webinar to reach out if something was not clear enough. And also we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so feel free. And I encourage you to stay until the end to be able to benefit from this Q&A session. And so what can we do about it? Okay, let's say that we are having these genetic variants and that we know that from a genetic point of view, we're kind of screwed, right? Because we have no control over that. You can't change your genes. But you know what you can change? You can change the way your genes express themselves. And by that, what I mean is that you can have these genetic variants, right? You can have them. You inherited them. You inherited them from your parents. But this doesn't mean that these genetic variants or these genes will have an effect on your body, because these genes can stay mutated. Like here in Zoom. In Zoom, you are all on mute right now, so you can't talk. So let's say that these genes, when you're born, are all on mute. Okay, and then depending on your lifestyle, they will start to unmute themselves. And you don't want them to unmute themselves, okay? You want them to stay on mute. And the best way to keep them on mute is through lifestyle. And that's what we call, by the way, epigenetics. So epigenetics is the impact of your environment and lifestyle on your gene expression. And so that's the good news here, is that there is a 50-50 rule here regarding AMD. So 50% of it is the genetic component of it, okay? And then there is also the modifiable part of it through lifestyle that is also present and that we can act on. And now a few examples about some lifestyle changes that you could make to improve your risk of having AMD. So here, for example, a high adherence to the Mediterranean diet lowers your risk of developing the advanced forms of AMD by 41%. 41%, that is huge. And this same number has been validated through different studies all across the world. So it has been validated also in the US, in Europe, in Asia, you name it. So the Mediterranean diet works, period. And based on that, by the way, I want to touch on a diet that is being developed right now also by AMDF that is called the AMD diet. I don't know, Matthew, if you want to say a few words about that.
Sure. So the AMD diet is really largely based on the Mediterranean diet. It includes all the components of the Mediterranean diet, but places added emphasis on certain other areas as well. So, for instance, we've supported research that very strongly indicates that glycemic index has a tremendous impact on increasing risk for AMD and increasing progression of AMD. and therefore maintaining a low glycemic index diet, which means consuming carbohydrates that enter the bloodstream more slowly and are digested more slowly, as opposed to sugary foods, where you have a dramatic, hard impact of sugar at the cellular level. Maintaining an awareness of the kind of carbohydrates that you're consuming will also contribute to reducing risk. And so it's just particular emphasis that we add onto the Mediterranean concept. And there are other aspects of it as well that we're going to bring forth in our website eventually. But the AMD diet is largely based on the Mediterranean diet.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you a lot, Matthew, for sharing this. And I will tell you more about this Mediterranean diet. And we will keep investigating all these changes, dietary changes that you can make. Let me just maybe mute someone, like we have someone here that is unmuted. Sorry. Perfect. So what is the Mediterranean diet? Well, that is the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet, is far beyond than a diet. The Mediterranean diet is a lifestyle. And the basis of the Mediterranean diet is to be physically active, to enjoy meals with others, is to be happy. Like that's the aim of all what we are trying to achieve here today, right? We want to be able to live a healthy and happy life. So everything you do in your social life, in your going and visiting your children, your grandchildren, your family, all that is part of the Mediterranean diet, and that's the basis of it. Okay, and then we will move to the food part of the Mediterranean diet. And in the food part, well, we want you to consume and to eat as much fruits and vegetables as possible. And so on a daily basis, please try to have fruits, vegetables, grains, olive oil. Olive oil is amazing for AMD. There are studies showing that olive oil is protective against AMD. So please just, there are these small recommendations and habits to have that are not very hard to integrate into your daily life, and that will help you have a higher adherence to the Mediterranean diet. Okay. And then fish, very important component of the Mediterranean diet. And I know that sometimes having access to fish can be difficult because maybe you live like inland or you don't have the financial resources to buy fish. We will talk afterwards, like in the webinar just later on, about different options to be able to access fish wherever you are and in a budget-friendly approach. And so try to have fish at least 2 times per week, 3 times would be amazing. And then there is all the other parts here: poultry, eggs, cheese, yogurt. I love yogurt, by the way. And try to have these like 1 to 2 times per week if you can. And then what you need really to enjoy sparingly, so keep enjoying, but like, for example, instead of eating red meat every day, try sometimes to replace red meat with fish or like with all kinds of others. Like now there are companies, for example, that produce all kinds of different types of steaks, that are not meat-based. I'm not saying to cut meat from your diet. Keep eating meat if you love meat. Just try to eat it less frequently, if possible. And regarding the fish, I want you to remember this acronym here, SMASH. Okay, I want you to smash the fish. So, and SMASH here stands for salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardine, and herring. Whenever you go to the supermarket or like to a market or wherever you are doing your groceries, always think of SMASH. And whenever you find these kind of fishes, try to have one for dinner, for example, or like for lunch. And you know that you are helping your retina to be in a healthier state. And now we have developed actually in my research work a platform that is called Tina, and that we will talk about later, and that will help you actually to evaluate your adherence to the Mediterranean diet. And so I want to do a test with you here, like live. So that's the platform here. And I will fill out my information about how often do I eat. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect example. I love red meat. Like, don't get me wrong. I love red meat. And it's hard for me to cut it from my everyday's meals. But like, I'm trying to work towards that. So personally, I eat red meat. Yeah, like, I would say 2 to 3 times per week, even though I'm saying to enjoy it sparingly. I'm not perfect. Poultry, yeah, I would say also 2 to 3 times per week. I eat fatty fish more than, I would say, once per day. I love fatty fish because fatty fish is salmon, mackerel, and all that, but it's also canned tuna, for example, or like frozen fish. I will get back to that later. Whitefish, I don't eat whitefish often. Seafood, I never eat seafood. And lunch meat, yeah, I'll say once a week. Or less, yeah, I'll say once a week. Actually, it's less than once a week. Milk, I don't drink milk, but I love yogurt. So yeah, I eat more than 2 per day. And cheese, well, now I'm based in Canada, so the cheese here is really bad. But I'm going back to France for a couple of weeks next week. So I'll be eating cheese again. So very often I eat cheese like twice per day, yeah, because I love cheese. Whole grain bread, I would say once a week. I eat cereals every morning for breakfast. Boiled potatoes, I have them once a week, and whole grain rice and pasta. Yeah, I would say 2 to 3 times per week. And here, what's important to understand is that we're talking about the whole grain, right? It's not like, because it's whole grain that we want. Okay, so whenever you go to shopping or doing like your groceries, always look for these labels with the whole grain, right? For bread, rice, and pasta. Very important. Veggies, I eat them more than twice a day. Fresh fruits, more than twice a day. Fresh juice every day. Olive oil, 100 times per day. Like, I use it all the time. I also, what I love doing also at breakfast, I love having just olive oil with bread and cheese. It's amazing. Legumes, I would say 2 to 3 times per week. And alcohol, well, now I'm in my dry month, so I didn't drink alcohol for the whole month of March. So I would say never or less than once a month, but very often I have it, like, I would say 2 to 3 times per week. And so, okay. So here you see, with this, what I just shared with you, I have an adherence to the Mediterranean diet that is high. I have a score that is 14 out of 18, which is a high adherence to the Mediterranean diet. And as you could see, it's the diet that I just shared with you is not a diet, like, I'm not feeling that I'm putting a lot of energy in eating the way I eat. It's just having a few principles, or like having a few references, and based on these references that you are going to get from this webinar, from the AMD diet of AMDF, from your dietitians, if you see a dietitian, like, based on these simple recommendations and reflexes that you can have, you can really improve your diet dramatically without putting that much energy into these changes. So now I will come back to the presentation. Yeah, and so here, why do we say that lifestyle plays the hand? You remember, like, this saying that we had here: heredity deals the cards and environment plays the hand. That's why. It's because of all these scientific findings that I've been sharing with you. And here we will focus a little bit more on omega-3s. As I've been advising you, we want you to have a lot of SMASH as possible. Olive oil also contains omega-3s. Flaxseed contains a lot of omega-3s. Walnuts contains omega-3s. So you can find algae contain omega-3s. You can find omega-3s in all kinds of ingredients that you can have on in your daily life. And here you can also understand that a high intake of omega-3s reduces the risk of advanced AMD by 38%, even in genetically predisposed patients. Imagine that. That's when I say that lifestyle impacts the expression of your gene. Even in genetically predisposed patients, a high intake of omega-3s reduces the risk of advanced AMD by 38%. And there is also this study that has been published by Dr. Emily Chu last December. Dr. Emily Chu is the principal investigator of the ARED study. If some of you are having these ARED supplements, Dr. Emily Chu is the principal investigator of that ARED study that led to these supplements. And she has said in her latest study that higher levels of omega-3s are causally associated with a reduced risk of advanced AMD. So what does that mean? It means that high levels of omega-3s cause a reduced risk of advanced AMD. Very, very, very important.
Soufiane, can I ask a question right now?
Yes, please.
So you're talking about reducing risk of AMD.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit right now about the difference between risk and progression? Because I'm a person that has macular degeneration. I've been told maybe that I have early macular degeneration or intermediate macular degeneration, and I'm trying to do something to slow its progression down. Are you saying that these findings indicate that by consuming higher levels of omega-3s, I can slow it down? Or is there an association between a reduction in my risk of getting to a more advanced state? There's a slight difference there. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So everything depends on the study that you are referring to. There are studies that start analyzing the onset of advanced AMD in patients who have the dry stage, like early AMD, and then they predict their risk of progressing to the advanced stage. There are studies also that focus only on people who are already at the advanced stage, and then they predict their risk of worsening of their condition. Like, for example, there are studies that will only include people with geographic atrophy, and then we'll try to find risk factors that are associated with the progression of their geographic atrophy over time. So it all depends on your baseline population. In most of the studies, they compare people who are free of AMD to and predict their risk of developing the advanced forms of the disease. So in majority of studies, it's people who are free of AMD and what is the risk of developing the advanced stages of AMD. These are like the majority of the studies. But there are also other studies that are based solely on patients who are already at the dry stage at baseline or who already have the advanced forms at baseline. That could be, by the way, that could be definitely the subject of a future webinar. We can have a future webinar mainly oriented towards progression of AMD in participants or in patients who already have the advanced forms of AMD, for example. And we could go through all the literature, right, regarding this and while making it available from a scientific point of view. Maybe like Dorothy, if you want to add a few words, please feel free to say something. Otherwise, I can continue the presentation.
Yeah, I would continue. I'm busy answering questions in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about anything you want. You just call on me, and I'm here for Q&A as well at the end if anyone has specific questions.
Perfect. Yes. So that's the thing. So here, for example, we say that high levels of omega-3s are causally associated with a reduced risk of advanced AMD. So I guess that when you go to see your eye doctors, some of them will prescribe omega-3s for you. And what does that mean? This means that omega-3s, these supplements that will be taken of omega-3s will increase the levels of omega-3s in your organism, in your body, right? But we don't know how much of these omega-3s will go from your blood to your retina. And by saying that, I mean that all of us here in this webinar, how many of us are here, by the way? We are 174 participants. We can all here take the exact same supplements of omega-3s. Let's say we take all the same supplements of omega-3s. Well, let me tell you something. We will not have the same levels of omega-3s in our retina based on this supplement, which means that our different retinas are unique, and which means that every single retina will absorb these omega-3s from the blood at a different rate and at a different capacity, because the absorption by omega-3s or of omega-3s by the retina depends on so many other factors that go beyond how much omega-3s you put into your body. That's what we call the bioavailability of omega-3s in your retina. For example, older people will have a bioavailability that is lower than younger people, for example. And I will get to that also at the end of the presentation. And so that's what I said. Today, more and more eye doctors prescribe omega-3s to their patients, but the problem is they don't know if these patients need omega-3s. They don't know, because they don't know much about these patients' diet, and they don't know much about these patients' habits, about all the other environmental factors that impact these patients' retinal absorption by these omega-3s. And so the main question here is how can we know how much omega-3s go from these pills that we are giving these patients, or go from whatever these patients are eating in terms of fish, for example, how much of these omega-3s go from their blood to their retina? And that was a research question that I was working on during my research work, and that's what led to the development of TINA. So TINA is the only digital health platform that helps you track how much omega-3s you have in your retina based on a blood drop. So that's what we have done. We have developed algorithms that, based on an analysis of a small blood drop, so it's a finger prick based test, based on this small analysis, can help you evaluate how much omega-3s you have in your retina, but more importantly, can help you track the evolution of these omega-3s in your retina over time to help you reach and maintain optimal levels. And so to see if we were able to impact the levels of omega-3s in patients' retinas based on what they're eating, we gave them all the same supplements. Okay, we gave these patients the same supplements, and we put them in two groups. We had a supplemented group, and then we had a placebo group. So the placebo group are people who are not having omega-3s. That's what we call the placebo group. And what we have shown here is that after 3 months of supplementation, the supplemented group had a significantly higher levels of omega-3s in their retina, as you can see here, compared to the placebo group that stayed at a lower level. And that we have managed to maintain this difference up to after 6 months, of supplementation. So what does that mean is that we are able today, thanks to this blood test here, to tell you how does your supplementation, if you're taking any supplementation of omega-3, impact your retinal health in terms of omega-3 concentrations. And so the objective of this research work is to help you personalize your diet to reach and maintain optimal levels of omega-3s in your retina. As we have shown that patients who had advanced AMD had significantly lower levels of omega-3s in their retinas compared to healthy patients. So if you have omega-3s in your retina, you probably have lower levels of omega-3s in your retina compared to people who are free of AMD. But then once we have discovered that, and that we have developed that test, and that now we are trying to bring to the masses, we were like, okay, well, that's very promising, by the way. And we managed to have a patent around that test, which shows the innovative aspect of that test. But then we were like, okay, why should we stop at omega-3s if we can go farther than that? Omega-3s are very crucial, of course, for the functioning of the retina, but it's not the only molecule that plays an important role in the functioning of the retina. And that's why we have started investigating other nutrients. So, for example, here, other results that I want you to remember and to keep, please, in your mind and to share with other people in your families. So a diet rich in vitamin D may prevent or delay progression to the advanced forms of AMD, specifically and especially for people who have the wet form of AMD, that is also called the neovascular form of AMD. And again, you have the references at the bottom of the screen, scientific references. Lutein and zeaxanthin, very, very important. These two molecules here, you have to be really familiar with them. Like if you have AMD, you have to know what lutein and zeaxanthin are, what is their role in your retina. And for this, I will take 2 minutes just for lutein and zeaxanthin, because very, very important. You have them in the AREDS supplements, in all the supplements, by the way, that are linked to AMD, you will find lutein and zeaxanthin. Otherwise, just they're missing something. Okay, so lutein and zeaxanthin is what we call the macular pigment. And so what will they do? This lutein and zeaxanthin will go and will accumulate in your retina to protect it from harmful free radicals. I guess that no one here knows what free radicals. I will explain this to you. Your retina is a living organism, let's say, and it does an amazing job. Your retina is very busy. Imagine, like, it is capable of receiving the light that you are, like, from the outside world, processing the light, transforming the light into electricity, and then sending an electrical message from your retina to your brain. Imagine that, transforming light into electricity. This takes a lot of energy for the retina to do this. And while doing this, well, of course, this retina will start generating waste, right? Because every living organism generates waste at some point. So it will start generating waste that we call free radicals. The free radicals here are the waste I'm talking about. And this waste will keep accumulating in your retina, accumulating. And at some point, it will cause what we call oxidative stress, which means that it will start bothering the functioning of the retina. It will start perturbing the functioning of the retina. And so our objective is to be able to get rid of this waste, of these free radicals. We don't want them to be in our retina anymore. How can we do that? How can we remove the oxidative stress due to the waste in our retina? It's thanks to lutein and zeaxanthin, because lutein and zeaxanthin are antioxidants. Antioxidants means is that they fight the oxidative stress. Think of lutein and zeaxanthin as your garbage collectors, okay? They come to your retina, they collect all the waste and the garbage, and they remove it from the retina to keep it healthy and to maintain a good function of the retina, okay? And that's why there are many studies, countless studies today, that have shown that lutein and zeaxanthin have a protective role against the progression and the onset of the advanced stages of AMD. Here is just like one of them. And there are so many. And in this one in particular, it says that increased levels of lutein and zeaxanthin, which are antioxidants, are associated with a 40% risk reduction of advanced AMD. And that was made in a large-scale study of over 100,000 participants. That's why I shared with you this one in particular. But there are so many other scientific studies saying the exact same thing.
I would add one thing to that.
Yes.
Oh, you're going to say it right here. Lutein. What are the foods that contain lutein and zeaxanthin? Right, that's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And it looks like you're going to review those. So therefore, I have no comment. But I would listen closely to what Soufiane has to say right here, because consuming the foods that are high in the plant pigments called lutein and zeaxanthin is critical in the care of your eyes if you have macular degeneration. So carry on.
Perfect. I'll carry on. But thank you, Dorothy. So you can find lutein and zeaxanthin in these ingredients. So whenever again you go to grocery, like to the shop to buy whatever you want to buy to eat, please always think dark leafy greens. Like always have this reflex. Dark leafy greens are rich in lutein and zeaxanthin, like you can't imagine. Like, and by that I'm talking about like spinach, like lettuce, for example. If you love salad, go with lettuce. And also don't forget about fruits, because now we're talking about vegetables, but also fruits are very important, and in particular orange and yellow fruits like oranges and papayas, for example. And last but not least, herbs and spices. I'm originally from Morocco, and we love tagines in Morocco. And in tagines, you have a lot of herbs and spices. So that's why I think we have a lower prevalence of AMD in North Africa compared to other Western countries. But like herbs and spices like parsley, basil, contain significant amounts of lutein and zeaxanthin. And I want us to keep discovering this subject of garbage collecting and of antioxidants. So I want to share with you also a few other nutrients that you can also have access to, and that can act as garbage collectors for your retina to go and remove these free radicals and that waste from there to help it continue functioning in a very healthy way. So vitamin E. Vitamin E, very, very important antioxidant. It helps retinal cells, as I said, to protect them from oxidative stress and damage caused by these free radicals. Vitamin A, especially through beta carotene, you find it also in the Aries formula, beta carotene, helps also protect the retina against oxidative stress. Curcumin, who would have thought that? Curcumin has amazing neuroprotective effects in the retina, reducing also the oxidative stress in retinal cells. And finally, last but not least, like I can't cite them all, so I just cited like a few. CoQ10 or coenzyme Q10. What it does actually is that it gives your retina the energy that it needs while protecting it from oxidative stress. So CoQ10 not only protects from oxidative stress, but provides the retina with energy to keep doing a good job in transforming the light that it is receiving to electrical signal. And so here again, a few sources where you could go and have access to all these nutrients in your daily life. So you can have them from leafy greens, eggs and fish for vitamin A, vitamin D, fatty fish, sunlight exposure, of course. Vitamin E, you can go with nuts, seeds, spinach. Coenzyme Q10, you can have them a lot in peanuts, pistachios, spinach, and broccoli. And turmeric you can find, curcumin, you can find it in turmeric. Yeah, like curcumin comes from turmeric. It's the active component of turmeric. And based on these findings, we are now working hard to integrate them also to this blood test I was talking about before, as we want this blood test to be able to give you a general overview of key AMD-related biomarkers that are associated with your disease progression, or at least with the functioning of. Let me just stop sharing my screen, mute everybody again, and I think I will. So from now on, if you want to, like, I muted everyone, and if you want to talk, like, it will ask you to give him permission, but I will get back to that later. Let me just get back to here. Okay. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Our objective here is to bring you all these latest scientific advances to you from the comfort of your home. And that's what we are trying to do through an at-home blood tests that you can have access to. But then, okay, let's say that we bring you all that, okay, and that you have access to all the scientific insights that I've been sharing with you for the last 45 minutes now. But like, if you don't change your habits, then why are you doing all that? Why are we discovering all these scientific insights if you're not changing your habits? And we know that changing habits is hard. I know that changing habits can feel impossible, because we all have this habit loop. And by habit loop, I mean it's a loop that we call cue, routine, reward. And let's say that, for example, before having this webinar, I will be honest with you, I was a bit stressed before having this webinar with you, because there were hundreds of people who subscribed and registered for the webinar. So I was like, oh man, hundreds of people. So I was a bit stressed. My routine was to go and climb. I love rock climbing. There are other people's routines is to go and snack, which is not a really good habit. But both climbing for me and snacking for other people, both of us, it will provide us with this reward, which is a relief. Okay, now I feel better regarding this stress. And so it depends on how you manage your stress, for example, and on how you manage your habits in a general manner. But like all the time, you will have a cue, a routine, a reward. If it is a good habit loop, like being stressed, going to the gym for climbing, for example, for me, and then having this relief reward, then okay, let's continue doing this. But most of the time, it's a bad habit loop. Most of the time, we will go more towards snacking and towards drinking, for example, alcohol, to find some kind of relief instead of trying to do physical activity, for example, or reading a book or like meditating. And so now the question that we can ask ourselves is that how can we break a bad habit loop? What can we do about it? And I wanted to share with you an experiment, an example here, that when I discovered that, first of all, I was laughing out loud, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to integrate this to this webinar. So this experiment happened in a healthcare facility in intensive care units, where most of the healthcare professionals did not wash their hands before going to the intensive care unit. And that's like, I don't know, nursing 101 or like healthcare professionalism 101. But like here, like the problem that they had was like, is it possible to help these people, these healthcare professionals who don't want to wash their hands? Is it possible to have them improve and sustain hand washing compliance rates among these healthcare workers in an intensive care unit? So that's the main question here of this experiment. And here is just to give you an idea. So what they have done in this healthcare unit, they have put a camera in front of the sink where these healthcare professionals were supposed to wash their hands before going to the OR, for example. Okay. And despite the camera, and these healthcare professionals knew that they were on videotape, despite that, they just didn't care. And only 1 in 10, so 10% of them cared to wash their hands before going to the OR and start operating patients. Imagine that. And then what they have done is that they have put a board that they call a feedback board, and they put it on top of the sink. Okay. And in this board, let's take the example of Pete, for example. Let's say Pete is a nurse. Pete is a member of this experiment. Okay. Pete is a healthcare professional. And so Pete will go in front of the sink and he will see that board saying to him, okay, Pete, in your current shift, you washed your hands 95% of the time. So Pete is a good student here. He used to wash he washed his hand during this current shift 95% of the time. And then in this same board, Pete would receive a tracking of his performances over time, meaning that like this board will also inform Pete about his weekly rate, which is here WR, which means that for the whole week, Pete was consistent of the 95% rate, and on a monthly rate, so in a whole month, Pete washed his hands 9 times out of 10, so 90% of the time before going to OR. So, and this board is congratulating Pete. He's telling him, congratulations, Pete, great shift. And it's not only stopping there, but it's also comparing Pete's performance, which is this board here on top, to the other healthcare professionals. That's what we mean here by OHCP, other healthcare professionals. And so this is comparing Pete's performance to the performances of the other healthcare professional in his intensive care unit. And as you can see here, Pete is doing as the average of the other healthcare professionals. And the advantage of this is that imagine now someone who has a current shift rate of like 10% and who would go and see this board, and that he would say, okay, well, I'm in 10%, and on average, my whole intensive care units are washing their hands 95% of the time, and I'm only washing them 10% of the time. So what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing a good job? And so this person will start trying to understand the reasons behind their comportment and their behaviors. And once they have put that in place, bam, they moved the compliance with the hand washing from 10% to over 90%. So in other words, at the beginning, 1 in every 10 or 1 in 10 healthcare professionals used to wash their hands. After they put the board, 9 in 10 healthcare professionals started washing their hands. And why is that? Because there was this social incentive. Social incentive is what I showed you here when they compared Pete's performance to other healthcare professionals' performance. Immediate reward. Pete washes his hands and then he receives this message. Great shift, Pete. You're doing a good job. And then progress monitoring. As I told you here, Pete was able to evaluate his performance through his weekly rate, WR here, and his monthly rate. So these are the 3 behavioral techniques that were used to help this service move from 10% compliance to 90% compliance. And so we're talking about social incentive, immediate reward, and then progress monitoring. And then based on that, how can we now adapt this to improve our retinal health, right? It would be amazing if we were to find a way to integrate these 3 behavioral change techniques, which are social incentive, immediate reward, progress monitoring, to our daily life, to be able to make the right decisions regarding our retinal health, to maintain it in a good health or to improve its health over time. Well, that's where I will go back to Tina again, because we have tried to do something like that in this digital platform here. You know, if you remember, that's where we have evaluated my adherence to the Mediterranean diet. But now what we are working on in this digital platform here is to try to help you not only evaluate your adherence to the Mediterranean diet, but also to help you monitor the levels of your retinal levels of omega-3s over time. That's for progress tracking. And then our objective also is to be able to provide you with quick and easy to implement habits in your daily life. Like, for example, today, you might be willing to swap butter for olive oil. And then you would just say, okay, I have done that today. Then you click in here and you say, okay, how was my experience? Was it challenging? And then complete the habit. And so here the objective is really to provide you with these easy to follow recommendations that you might use and follow on your daily basis. And that will bring you towards a better adherence to the Mediterranean diet and an improvement of your retinal health over time. And then, of course, the objective is to be able to give you the tools to compare your adherence to other people's adherence in your community, for example. So here you would have only people who have macular degeneration, for example. And let's say that I'm Sarah. So my retinal levels of omega-3s today are 17.7, and I have improved them by 7% for the last trimester, for example. And for the community, now I'm going to zoom here. The average retinal omega-3s for the community is 16.5, and they have been improving them by 23%. And so as you can see here, the objective is to help you improve these AMD-related biomarkers that I was talking about, and at the same time, help you benefit from the support of a whole community to help you make these changes over time. And now I will finish by an example. Let's get back to Pete again, but this time Pete, he's still a nurse, of course, but now we are interested into Pete's retinal health, because Pete has shared with us that he had dry AMD, but that he also had hypertension, and he was also suffering from obesity. And Pete took the TINA test that I was talking about, the finger prick based test, and we realized that Pete had a level of omega-3s in his retina that is below the optimal threshold. And that's not good. We want Pete to maintain higher levels of omega-3s in his retina. And in addition to that, regarding all the other molecules and nutrients that I shared with you that act as a garbage collector for the retina, here they are, all of them. By the way, omega-3 also is a garbage collector. Omega-3 also has antioxidant properties. And so for Pete, once he took the test, he had these results. So Pete had a low level of vitamin E. He had optimal levels of low level of vitamin D, optimal levels of vitamins E and A. He had a low level of lutein and zeaxanthin. That's not good. Optimal levels of coenzyme Q10 and a low level of curcumin. And Pete had also an adherence to the Mediterranean diet that was intermediate. And Pete doesn't earn a lot of money. He has 3 jobs, and yet he's still a low income. And he lives in a rural area, let's say like inland somewhere in the US. And so that's the kind of recommendations that we want to be able to provide Pete with to help him improve his habits and hopefully improve his retinal health over time. So for example, here, as Pete has a low income, we will advise Pete to go and have canned sardines, for example, which costs $1 to $2 per can, or like have ground flaxseed, which costs like $3 to $4 per bag, and that can last for weeks. As I said, lutein and zeaxanthin are very important. So we will encourage Pete to go and have low-cost vegetables for lutein and zeaxanthin, like frozen spinach packets, for example, or like if Pete lives in a rural area inland, for example, he could even grow his own leafy greens. And for blood pressure, as Pete suffers from hypertension, we could ask Pete to replace salt with garlic, herbs, and turmeric, for example, for flavor. Remember that turmeric, that's what provides you with curcumin, that is also an antioxidant and a garbage collector. And then for weight management, we will ask Pete to replace processed snacks that he loves eating with, like, sometimes with raw veggie slices with hummus and 1 or 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm not saying that you have to replace all your snacks with veggies. Keep eating snacks. Just from time to time, try to replace them with something that is healthier for you. The objective here is not to tell you start eating salad and stop eating meat. No, the objective here is to tell you keep having fun while eating. As I said, having fun is the basis of the Mediterranean diet. But while having fun, try to improve the ways to have fun. That's all what we're talking about here. And by following this program that we have shared with Pete here, Pete was able to reach optimal levels of omega-3s in his retina, for example, as that was our objective. And let's remind you that like patients with advanced AMD have significantly lower content and levels of omega-3s in their retinas compared to healthy individuals. So it's good. It's a good thing that Pete was able to improve his levels of omega-3s in his retina. And now just a few words about the science supporting these recommendations, because these recommendations were not generated automatically and in a very one-size-fits-all manner. These recommendations were provided Pete because Pete suffers from obesity, Pete suffers from hypertension, and both these conditions cause a chronic inflammation for Pete, which impairs the transport of omega-3s from his blood to his retina, and this causes that Pete had lower levels of omega-3s in his retina. So that's his problem. The problem that Pete has low levels of omega-3s in his retina, as you can see here, it doesn't come from the fact that he doesn't eat enough omega-3s. Maybe he's eating enough omega-3s, but because of these conditions here, it doesn't allow and it doesn't favor these conditions. These conditions don't favor omega-3s to go from Pete's blood into his retina because of the chronic inflammation that causes the impairment of the transport of omega-3s in his body. And so the solution that we have proposed to him is to pair leafy greens with olive oil, because pairing leafy greens with olive oil will help with a better absorption of lutein in the retina. Lutein, which is an antioxidant, a garbage collector, right? And the fact that there is more now lutein in his retina, this will support the incorporation of omega-3s in his retina. And of course, the fact that Pete is also eating canned sardines that are rich in omega-3s will improve this process even further. So that's the big picture here. Okay, the objective here is not just to tell you, okay, I don't have enough omega-3s in my retina, I will just eat omega-3s. Or like if I eat a lot of omega-3s, I will have a lot of it in my retina. No, it doesn't work that way. Like your organism depends on your environment. And by environment, I'm talking about like how much money you're making. I'm talking about like where do you live. I'm talking about the pollution that you're exposed to. I'm talking about all kinds of other external factors that go far beyond your intake in omega-3s and that impact the way your omega-3s are transported in your body and the ability of your retina to absorb them to be able to function in a correct way. And so that being said, now the objective is to collaborate with you. We want you to be part of this research work. I don't want anymore to be guessing what patients need and then say, okay, they need this, so I will just work with my research team in our lab without talking to any patients and then just come up with solutions. It doesn't work that way. The objective from now on, at least for me, is to collaborate with you, is to talk to you. Okay, what do you need? Okay, what do you need? How can we be of help? That's what we know. That's what we know what to do, or that's what we know how to do. So now tell us what to do for you. Okay, and that's why we want now to open this project actually to as many people as possible, because our objective here is to be able to personalize this Tina here to every single one of you. I can see, Jennifer, that you raised your hands. Please, yeah, you can. Let me just stop sharing the screen. You can talk, Jennifer.
Hi. Yeah, it wasn't letting me unmute. We've got a lot of questions building up in the chat, and I wanted to make sure that we have time to get to those. And I know Dr. Hitchmuth has been in there typing away and answering some of those questions, but I think some of them are worth also actually talking about, because I think a lot of people might share the same questions and may not be looking at the chat or aware that that's going on. So,
perfect.
Can we open that up now?
Yeah, of course. Like I had finished. That was the last slide, by the way. Okay. I had finished. So,
we're not.
Let's go through a few questions, maybe.
Sure, and I've got them typed out here. Most of them up until the most recent one. So I'll read some of these off. I do want to let people know that If we don't get to all of the questions now, we'll try to do some sort of follow-up in writing, a blog post or something with answers to questions. So let's see. One person wanted to know, Bonnie wanted to know, is canned fish as good as fresh fish?
Yes. That's the short answer. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Really,
sorry. Wait. There you go. Can you?
Okay. Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah. And another question somebody asked, I can't find it, but it's essentially, how does the TINA test differ from just an omega-3 blood test? Can you explain that? Why it's different, why this particular test is different, and why this one's important?
Yes, of course. A regular omega-3 test will tell you how much omega-3s you have in your body, you have in your blood. That's what it's going to tell you. And what matters to us, what we want to understand and to know, is not how much omega-3s you have in your blood. That's also important. But in our case, for AMD, we want to know how much omega-3s is absorbed by the retina, because AMD, it develops in the retina. And so we want these omega-3s, that are these antioxidants, we want them to be present in large numbers in the retina. Always think of omega-3s as garbage collectors. They are in your blood, okay? They are like walking in your blood, but then you want them to reach your retina to start collecting the garbage from the retina. With these other tests, you know how much garbage collectors you have in your blood, but it doesn't tell you how much you have in your retina, and it doesn't tell you what you should do to increase the number of garbage collectors in your retina. So to increase the number of omega-3s in your retina. So that's the main difference. The other tests, they tell you how much omega-3s is in your blood. TINA test tells you how much omega-3s is in your retina specifically.
I can offer a few general comments based on all the questions that I just reviewed, because a lot of them are similar. And I can distill a lot of the questions down to one phrase. And I think all of you will remember this just like I do. You are what you eat. And that is really true in macular degeneration. So there are a lot of questions about omega-3 supplements. It has been shown in the studies across the board that if you eat foods rich in omega-3 fats, that is a lot better than taking a fish pill. That's been proven over and over again in the macular degeneration studies, in dry eye studies, and in cardiovascular health studies. So what Soufiane has said here is really you need to eat these foods. If you don't like the stinky fish, there are lots of other omega-3 foods that you can eat. Walnuts, for example. I happen to mix chia seeds into my grass-fed yogurt, or grass-eating animals that eat grass that you make yogurt from. And I know that's a little more complicated, but that is one continuous theme. It's what should I do for omega-3? Should I take the pills? The food is better, so why not do the food, right? And you can get inexpensive omega-3s in food. In fact, it's actually probably cheaper to buy the food than to buy expensive supplements relative to omega-3. The AREDS formula does not have omega-3 in it. There was one arm of one of the ARED studies that did contain that, and there was shown to be some benefit, even especially in people who've had wet macular degeneration in one eye. So that's one theme I see in the chat. You know, keeping your weight in check and not smoking, those are huge. So, you know, there's a lot of minutia in the question in the chat about zinc. Also, zinc can be toxic, and whether or not you should take zinc in your ARED supplement based on your genetics or not is really dependent on what food you eat. So talk to your nutritionist, talk to your doctor. The daily the minimum recommendation for men is 15 milligrams a day and women is 17 milligrams a day. So it really depends. Like if you have a multivitamin with 15 milligrams and you're taking AREDS with the AREDS formula with 80, that may be too much for you. It just depends. So talk to your individual provider about your diet in combination with supplements. Remember supplements, what that means. A supplement means a supplement to your diet, not a substitute for your diet. And I tell my patients that all the time. So you are what you eat, keep on moving, wear your sunglasses, don't smoke, put down the wine bottle, and you really can make a difference in the trajectory or the course of your macular degeneration. And I'm banking on that because whether you can see my red hair or not, I definitely have Northern European genes and I have drusen in my retina and I'm 58. Okay. So this is important to me too. I do these things and I've had to change my behavior, even though I eat the Mediterranean diet all the time. So learn as much as you can about what it means to eat the Mediterranean diet or a similar diet. You'll hear things or see things on the internet about the Nordic diet. That's another good one. The Okinawan diet. That's another good one. But really, they're all very similar in content to the most studied diet in the world, which is the Mediterranean diet. So I'll pause there. But I think that's the.
Yeah. Well.
So can I do a follow-up to what you just said? Because one of the questions that we got, I think, is somewhat related to that. Steve Clark, who says he's with Linda, 80 years old, has wet AMD in both eyes. When someone is that progressed with their vision loss, how does changing lifestyle and diet help them?
My answer to that is it's never too late. We don't, the older you are and the less time you've had to work on your change in behavior, your diet, the less impact it will have. But it doesn't mean that you should not start a new and good habit, even if you're 90 or 95.
And I think what they're wanting to know is it's not going to reverse their vision loss.
Correct.
But it still has the potential to slow any further progression of that vision loss. And, there's plenty of other health benefits as well, I would think.
Right. And I would just add this, and I see Matthew wants to jump in here. I'm sorry. Remember, all the recommendations that we're talking about here are good for your brain and your heart. The same recommendations for preventing cardiovascular disease and macular degeneration, they're the same. They're the same. Your risk of cardiovascular disease is higher if you have macular degeneration. I know that scares some people when I say that, but the American Heart Association has the same dietary recommendations as all of us in the eye doctor world. So even if you're not going to change your vision, it may actually help your heart. It may help slow cognitive impairment or dementia. So there are really multiple and powerful reasons to change your diet, no matter how old you are. Like there's an enormous difference between eating junk food high in trans fats versus a healthy meal, no matter what age you are. I'm fully convinced of that.
Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
I'd just like to comment on a few of the things that are being discussed now. First of all, as Jennifer indicated, we are getting a lot of comments that people are really engaged here. And we will review all the comments.
Yes.
And as Soufiane said, there are going to be future webinars where we can address some of these other large topics. Like I see there's a lot of conversation about photobiomodulation, which is the treatment that involves exposure to very specific ranges of red light. There's a whole bunch of questions about that. We can get to stuff like that because that really talks about mitochondrial function, and I'm sure there's connections to nutrition and that. But just want to get back to some of these other questions. I am not a scientist, and I am not a doctor. I happen to have read a lot about this stuff. So I'm going to throw something out there that if the scientist here and the doctor here disagree with, go ahead. But the reason that the retina starts to develop these leaky blood vessels that creates wet macular degeneration is because it's receiving signals that new blood vessels are required to hopefully heal a situation which is caused by chronic inflammation. And as what we just heard, chronic inflammation can largely be due to the diet that we take in. So once we correct our diets and reduce our state of chronic inflammation, the signaling that goes out that calls for the creation of these new blood vessels, which are leaky and faulty by nature, goes down. So I believe that if you change your diet, you're going to have less of your body calling for these leaky blood vessels to be created. And if you're on an anti-VEGF injection therapy, you'll also be countering that. So, people who are engaged in anti-VEGF therapy, which are the eye injections for wet AMD, are probably talking to their doctors constantly about how can I reduce the number of injections I'm getting? How can I extend the amount of time in between? And I wouldn't be surprised, and there may even be studies out there on this, that by reducing your chronic inflammation at the same time as you're taking anti-VEGF therapy, you could start to extend the time between if you change your habits. The other thing I want to mention about all of these habits, positive lifestyle habits, stopping smoking, reducing weight, maybe reducing weight by increasing exercise, changing your diet, they add, one adds to the other. So doing one is great, doing two is better. Doing as many as you can increases your ability to reduce risk. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a nutritional study came out fairly recently that indicates that changing your diet to a Mediterranean diet earlier in your diagnosis of AMD reduces your risk of transitioning to any later
That's right.
the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're talking about here is really therapeutic. Diet is a therapy, and you are what you eat is completely true. Okay, I think, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. A lot of people are talking about olive oil. I see someone mention they can't have olive oil, doesn't agree with them. We've been talking a lot about adding certain foods to your diet. And as Soufiane said, he's not suggesting that people just dramatically change their diet and cut out all the bad stuff and eat the good stuff. But there is a balance that's required in our bodies between the anti-inflammatory omega-3s and the inflammatory omega-6s. They're all necessary for what our body does. Your body does need to create inflammation when it's combating an infection, for instance. And we've been talking about the Mediterranean diet, but the Western diet, which is kind of the polar opposite of the Mediterranean diet, the Western diet typically contains very high levels of omega-6 fatty acids. And omega-6 fatty acids are very frequently found in vegetable oils. Can you guys talk about the good and the bad vegetable oils?
Oh, that's a big one. And you will start to see more about this in the popular news, the political news, you name it, because the oils used in packaged food, let me just make it more simple. The oils used in packaged food are absolutely bad for the heart and the retina. So any hydrogenated oils, if you look at the label, or trans fatty acids, if you look at your food labels, is the exact opposite of what you should be eating. Like someone had a question in the chat, are tortilla chips a good substitute for grains? Well, certainly not if they're fried in trans fatty acids. Mm-hmm. The closer the food is to its natural state, the less likely you are to get the bad fats, right? Personally, I am working very hard as part of Physicians for Responsible Nutrition to have the FDA control or limit the amount of bad fats, manufactured fats, or hydrogenated fats in our food supply. Like, it is that detrimental to your health. And again, it's eyes, brain, heart, all of that. So I think you'll hear more about that. I would say stay tuned. I think you could do a webinar on what are the foods to avoid. What are the top 20 foods to not eat, or what are the top 20 foods to eat. So, someone said olive oil upsets their tummy. Okay. So if you were my patient, I would say, go learn about chia seeds and how you can soak those overnight and use them in a whole variety of foods. They're very, very high in the good omega-3 or anti-inflammatory fats, right? Across the board, like, the data is really strong. If you are an American or you're eating the typical Western diet, it's not that you need a supplement with omega-3s. You don't have an omega-3 deficiency. You have an omega-6 deluge. You have just too much of the wrong fat. It's an imbalance. So you must balance that out. And the way, again, to balance that out is Mediterranean diet, Mediterranean diet, Mediterranean diet, right? And so go learn about the Mediterranean diet. Go watch the Pasta Grannies on YouTube. There's some great recommendations. And I think, what my patients will say to me is, I don't really know what the Mediterranean diet is. What are those foods? And I think that's something that you can all type in Mediterranean into your chat box, your Google search, or look for a cookbook in the library, whatever your resources are, and just look for some recipes that look appealing to you. If it's truly Mediterranean diet, I mean, there's even books, right? The Mediterranean diet this, the Mediterranean diet that. I will caution against this. There's a large social media group of eye doctors, and we share and exchange all of the Facebook, especially, not to pick on any particular social media platform, but across all of them, there are a lot of recipes that are shown that say this is a Mediterranean recipe and diet recipe, and they are not. Mm-hmm. So be a little bit careful if you're just pulling something, directly off a social media platform. Yeah, and I'll hit the pause button on that. I'm happy to.
No, perfect. I think that we have covered a lot, and I love the fact that we have so many questions. And thanks a lot for sharing all these questions. Just know, I'm gonna say it like this: I have saved the chat. Okay, so this means that I have all these questions now that are saved. I will go through them. Okay, and I will try to provide you with the answers. Okay, there are a lot of questions, so many. So I will do my best. Okay, and some of them I would love us to convert some of these questions to future webinar topics. Mm-hmm. Like, if we see that the same question has been asked so many times. By the way, please go read the chat, and if you see that someone has already asked your question, don't ask it again. Just put a thumb up. This way, it will let us know that these questions are very, very important, and then we could make another webinar out of that. Bring specialists here, and make these webinars as a place where knowledge can be transmitted, and in a very easy way and in a very comprehensive way to you. My last words here, because we have 36 minutes over time, but my last words here, and I will just share my screen again for the last minute, and then wait, sorry, where is it? It's here. Perfect. Yeah, I just where is it? Back. Okay, now you can see the screen. Yeah, that's my last words. And I really want you to keep these words, because that's our objective here in our collaboration with AMDF, and that's my personal objective as well, because my family right now is feeling alone and powerless regarding their vision deterioration, and all I'm doing is all the research I'm doing, these webinars. When I wake up in the morning, that's the only thing that I want to do. is to help you never feel again alone or powerless regarding your vision deterioration. And so please, like, I have this, I will share with you again a link to be able to book a free consultation with me or other health doctors with whom I'm collaborating. And the objective is really to listen to you, okay? Is to tell you, okay, what is your personal situation and how can we help you have an active role in managing your situation? That's really the objective of these consultations, is to share with you some knowledge, but also to personalize that knowledge to your specific situation. So you can, if you have a phone, you can scan this QR code. Otherwise, I will send you a follow-up email after this webinar with the replay of the webinar, of course, and also with a link to be able to book a slot with me directly, for example. I've already done that in the first email that I sent you, and I will do it again. Please feel free to book slots so that we can talk together. So that I can better understand your needs, and so that I can adapt my research work to meet your needs. And I think that we can close the webinar for now. And thank you a lot. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Dr. Hikmat, for all the great answers that you've been sharing with us. Thank you, Matthew, for even though you're not a scientist, but believe me, you know so much about AMD. Every time I'm so shocked by how much information and knowledge you have about AMD. And thanks a lot, everyone. You will have the replay. Thank you, Jennifer, as well. Jennifer worked hard to make this webinar possible. So thank you all. Thank you to AMDF, and see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.